Hey, welcome to the second edition of That Coffee Sound Off. Again, as usual, I just wanted to jump right into it. I did some research on Larry Burkett and his background because there really isn't much out there about Larry and his background other than a lot of stuff post 1970 where he became an evangelical Christian and got into financial counseling through some sort of Christian, ministry. Um, and then after that, he started. I guess he started his own nonprofit. Um, and so, yeah, there's I don't know there's something doesn't add up here. There's more to this story. I mean, how does Larry Burkett write a book called The Illuminati, one, and then two, how does he get the event so close? Um, there's much more to this story. I ended up ordering another one of the books that he wrote. This one's actually a non-fiction. It was published the exact same year as The Illuminati, 1991, and it's entitled The Coming Economic Earthquake. So of course I had to get this and I had to read it. I found the only new copy on Amazon and presumably the entire internet, and it cost a total of 22 cents, plus $3.99 shipping. So $4.21 later, I've read the book. It's a very sobering read, and he talks about exactly what's going on now. He talks about what happens if the government prints and prints and prints and avoids the necessary economic cycles and things that happen, such as depressions. And that's what has happened here. We're in 2015, and by any measure, we should have had a depression maybe 15, 20 years ago. And that hasn't happened, and a lot of that is due to central planning, a Federal Reserve System, central banks around the world that control the money. They control the money supply, they control inflation, they control deflation. It goes on and on. So we should have had a depression, but those in control and those who run the world and run the top banks have decided that they don't want to do that. So they've established all these different schemes to elongate the process, but really it's just getting worse. Um, Things should just happen naturally, like for instance the big banks should have just collapsed. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. I wanted to do some research on Larry Burkett because there's just not much out there, like I say. And I have another book that's conspiracy related. It's written by William Cooper, and it's entitled Behold a Pale Horse. And this book was sitting on my shelf, and I decided to take it out and read it. It's been a guide as well for me for quite some time. And I stumbled upon it was published in 1991. The exact same year that The Illuminati by Burkett was published, and the same year that The Coming Economic Earthquake by Burkett was published. So I thought that was kind of interesting because even just by pure coincidence alone, they were all published in 1991. What was up with 1991? So I started doing some background research on Larry Burkett and William Cooper because that got me interested. Because William Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse, is all about conspiracies, conspiracy theories, the secret government, UFOs, aliens, all that stuff. Essentially, all the stuff of the X-Files, but in real life. And so that all ties in with the Illuminati and the secret society and the guys that run the world. So I thought maybe there was something to this. Maybe there was something to both these guys. And I'm working on something. I'm working on trying to establish links between the two, because as from what I've seen, from what I've researched, I don't see much on this at all. So I put together a quick little timeline of both persons' lives, and there are some parallels. Larry Burkett was born in 1939. William Cooper was born in 1943. So Burkett was 4 years older. They both joined the Air Force, and specifically the Strategic Air Command within the Air Force, right after high school, which I thought was an interesting synchronicity and parallel at the same time. Larry must have joined somewhere around 1957. He was 18 years old. Cooper joined in 1961. He documented that. And then Larry, he did his 4-year stint, so he left the Air Force in 1961, and Cooper began the Air Force in 1961. So it's kind of interesting that as Larry Burkett was leaving the Strategic Air Command and was leaving the Air Force, William Cooper was entering the Strategic Air Command. And I have not been able to find where, at what base they both went to, because I cannot find anything on Larry Burkett. I cannot find anything on his military record. So unless I start calling people that knew him, which I might actually, because this is kind of interesting. I want to see if there's some sort of connection with this crossover with Strategic Air Command. And as we all know, to get into Strategic Air Command, you have to be elite. In fact, in William Cooper's book, he actually indicated that he was the elite of the Air Force. So these guys had to be at the top of their class out of high school to get into this. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so it goes on. Burkett leaves the Air Force in 1961, and he goes directly, that we know of, to Cape Canaveral and starts working for the Space Center down there, and the space program, actually, specifically. And if you look at it, this is his Wikipedia. We can go down here. So, upon completion of his military duties, Burkett and his wife Judy returned to Central Florida, where he worked in the space program at Cape Canaveral. He spent the next several years at the Space Center in charge of an experiments test facility that served the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo manned space programs. While working at the Space Center, Burkett earned degrees in marketing and finance at Rollins College. So we can see how he went on to have a career in finance. He obviously was going for those degrees. But isn't this interesting that after his stint in the Air Force, he works for Cape Canaveral? I mean, okay, he was in the Strategic Air Command. It probably would make sense in a way that he would then go on to work for the Space Center at Cape Canaveral. But isn't this interesting? And he works on the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo manned space programs. So I'm assuming to get that high, you have to be pretty high up in the Air Force, pretty intelligent guy, pretty with it. So this doesn't seem like, you know, some cadet or whatever, you know, some guy that just went through the Air Force, did his 4 years and left. I mean, yeah, he did his 4 years and left, but then he goes directly to work for the space program, I'm sure in a private capacity. Very, very interesting. And the moon landing, that was Apollo moon landing, that was 1969. Apollo 11. Yeah, July 20th, 1969. They land on the moon. And this is interesting to me because in 1970, Burkett left Cape Canaveral, and he went on to become the vice president of an electronics firm. So he altogether leaves the Space Center, and we know he was also at the same time getting a degree in finance. So apparently he was perhaps wanting to leave the Space Center, or he was wanting to start a different career. I don't know. But the fact is, he left the Space Center in 1970, and this was a half year to a year, say, after the Apollo landing. And he was working on the Apollo program. So what happened? I mean, they landed on the moon and he was like, cool, my mission here is done. Like, I'm out. You know, I'm just gonna go work in the private sector. I'm gonna go become, and yeah, he was in electronics, and I believe that's part of what he was doing at the space program. And so it might make sense that he just moved on and became a VP, blah blah blah. But that is an interesting connection. I just wanted to point that out. And then in 1972, that's when he became an evangelical Christian, which I also thought was interesting because it seems like, wow, what a turn of events. Suddenly you become this evangelical Christian who's super Christian and all about saving money and, you know, being, you know, using biblical money, you know, ways to deal with finances. I don't know. It's just very, very interesting, the whole thing. And then if we go back to Cooper, let's see, okay, we'll go back to 1961. He began his Air Force right out of high school in Strategic Air Command. In 1965, he ended his Air Force, his 4-year stint, and promptly joined the Navy right after, presumably because he always wanted to join the Navy. I don't know why he went into the Air Force first, but whatever. In 1966, he's in the Navy, he's on a ship somewhere, and this is when he sees his first UFO sighting. And that was sort of the awakening, when he sort of awakened to what was that, a UFO came out of the ocean and then went back in. So that was sort of what the, you know, heck moment right there. And let's see. In 1968, he starts Naval Intelligence School, which I thought was interesting because, you know, he said that he basically was, I guess he drew, you know, I don't know how he got into the school, but he did. So I thought that was kind of weird. Sorry, just taking a drink because, I don't know, I guess I get excited about this stuff. I'm a nerd. So, regardless, he starts the Naval Intelligence School in 1968. In 1969, he ends his Vietnam tour, where he finds out more about UFOs. So, pardon me. Basically, there's this weird thing going on where he goes into the intelligence in 1970 or 1969. He's out of the intelligence school, does a Vietnam tour, learns more about UFOs. Then in 1970, he goes to Hawaii. He's given top secret clearance by the head of the Pacific Fleet, which is crazy. And then, about 6 months later, he joins an intelligence briefing team. And that is where he learns all about the conspiracy stuff, which he goes on to write about in his book, Behold the Pale Horse. In 1972, he goes AWOL because he cannot handle all of the stuff that he's learned. He learned some stuff about the Kennedy assassination that made him just crazy. He couldn't take it. He then wanted to report a lot of this stuff because he was going nuts knowing all this stuff. He leaked some stuff to a reporter and was intimidated by some guys in a limo who ran him off a cliff. All this stuff happens. It's in the book, and they made him shut up. And he shut up till about 1988, where he then starts to write his book. So I thought that was really interesting. They both sort of went into the Strategic Air Command. You know, William Cooper lays out how he found out all this conspiracy stuff, and the mystery is still there as to how Larry Burkett himself found out all this stuff about the Illuminati. But the crossover is the Strategic Air Command. And then the fact that all these books were published in 1991 is kind of interesting to me, like what a coincidence. And then if we fast forward to their deaths, William Cooper died in 2001. He was, well, in 2000 he was declared a fugitive for tax evasion. In 2001 he was shot by a deputy over a dispute. I guess Cooper was having a dispute with his neighbors, and the police showed up, and he was armed, and stuff went awry. I guess he shot a cop, and the cop shot him, and that was the end of Cooper. So, kind of, a dramatic way to go out. I don't know if I would buy that story, or if a lot of people buy that story. So, just something to think about. But that is the official account. And that's also actually here on the Wikipedia, that all that stuff. So that's sort of the official story. And then let's go up to Larry Burkett, who died in 2003, and July 4th, 2003, which I thought was kind of interesting because the 4th of July, this guy dies, and he died of congestive heart failure. He had kidney cancer for a number of years, and in fact wrote a book about it. And so that might make sense. Kidneys are linked to the heart, and if you die of congestive heart failure, that might make sense in a lot of ways, because if your kidney is unable to filter, if it gets plugged up with stuff like nickel and mercury and other metals, you will literally, you'll start to get congestive heart failure. I mean, things will just back up. You'll get high blood pressure. Your heart will be able to work. It will have to work overtime. There's a lot of different stuff. I'm not going to go into that. So there really could be. I mean, he really could have died. Could have died of natural causes. However, he was working for the space program. Was probably exposed to a lot of different EMF, a lot of different stuff that would have caused cancer, working amongst all those machines. So that's just something to throw out there. But it's interesting that Burkett dies 2 years after Cooper. And this was after the Illuminati book was written. And, I mean, granted, this was 12 years after the Illuminati book was written. I do find that interesting, because Cooper, died 10 years after Behold a Pale Horse was written. So you almost have to wonder that again is a coincidence, 2 years of each other. In their late 50s, early 60s, they weren't that old, So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there, just some stuff to put together, that I put together for you guys, and some stuff for you to think about. I don't want to ramble on forever, but I'm going to do a part 2. I got some more stuff coming up. I have some ideas of how oil could go up, especially given the situation in Saudi Arabia right now. So yeah, part 2 is going to be pretty cool. And so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And this closes out the second edition of That Coffee Sound Off. Thank you guys for listening.